Hey there, interwebs, and welcome back to How Fascinating. Continuing what has apparently become an annual New Year's tradition, I'm going to share with you some cursed, or maybe I should say blursed, animal facts. But first, a question. Where do marsupials come from? You probably answered Australia, or if you're a smartass like my partner, a pouch, but they actually come from South America. It sounds crazy, I know, but it's true. The most basal lineage of all Australopithecines, that is, the marsupials of Australia, is Microbiotheria, but its sole extant species is endemic to the southern Andes. Dwelling in the forested highlands of Chile and Argentina, the tiny Monito del Monte, or Colo opossum, is the only surviving New World representative of Australadelphia, with the Australian Australopithecines, say that 3 times fast, forming the clade known as true Australadelphia, or the vowel-overdosed Australadelphia. All other New World marsupials belong to the paraphyletic grouping Ameridelphia, which has nothing to do with my hometown and America's birthplace, Philadelphia. This false taxon contains 2 orders, Possa tuberculata, also known as the more pronounceable shrew opossums, and Didelphimorphia. Although species of the latter order only expanded into Central and North America as part of the Great American Biotic Interchange during the late Cenozoic era, DNA analysis shows that the Ameridelphian orders had already diverged from the Australadelphian lineage roughly 60 million years prior. This biogeographical evidence indicates that marsupials originated in what is now South America before radiating outwards into Central and North America and Australasia, moving to the latter when the 2 continents were connected by Antarctica in the early Cenozoic. The order Microbiotheria diverged from the rest of the Australadelphian superorder before this transition, remaining behind in South America. As a result, marsupials can now be found in Australasia, as well as North and South America, with the New World species being known as opossums. Or is it just possums? Before anyone goes rushing to the comments section to share their manifesto about linguistics and American versus Australian marsupials, I'm going to preempt the debate and say it doesn't matter. The first recorded instance of the word opossum comes from 1610, and possum followed shortly thereafter in 1613. It's safe to assume then that both variations of the word entered the English language at the same time, and they're mutations of the Powhatan word apposum from the original Proto-Algonquin word meaning white dog animal. The paraphyletic Australian order of Phalangeriforms got the name of possums simply because several of its species resemble the American marsupials which European explorers were already familiar with. That being said, the Australian fauna are pretty exclusively referred to as possums without the initial O, but for their American cousins, the 2 words are functionally synonyms, and I will treat them as such throughout the remainder of this video. The possum, or opossum, which I'd like to focus on today, is the Virginia opossum, Didelphis virginiana to be specific, no pun intended. Other names include the trash kitten and North American opossum, with the latter being particularly apt. You see, although I once mistakenly believed that the Virginia opossum was the only marsupial found in the New World, or outside of Australia for that matter, they are the only marsupials found in the wild north of Mexico, and their range extends all the way into southern Canada, making them the world's northernmost marsupial. I've also claimed in the past that these opossums have more teeth than any other terrestrial mammal, and once again this is half correct. Just as how they're the only aplacental mammal north of Mexico, they're also the toothiest land mammal on this side of the border as well. Technically, the giant armadillo has about 80 to 100 teeth compared to the opossum's 50, but these are tiny little insectivore teeth, while opossums have a much more impressive dental battery. You can see a nearly complete example here on Mort, the first skull that I ever collected after a possum dropped dead in my parents' backyard. You can also get a good look at its brain case while you're at it. Based on its small size, you might assume that possums aren't the sharpest bulbs in the shoe, and in the words of 20th century poet and philosopher W.M. Joel, you may be right. Or maybe not. It's complicated. There are 3 key factors to consider. 1. Their brains are tiny. Opossums are second only to the Etruscan shrew for the lowest brain-to-body mass ratio of any mammal. The animal with the lowest ratio for the entire vertebrate subphylum, for those curious, is the bony-eared assfish. Opossum brains are only 1/5 the size of a domestic cat's and 1/6 the size of a raccoon's. Compare here the skulls of Curiosity, Mort, and Domino Deathmask, representing house cats, trash and trash pandas, respectively. You'll see that Mort's brain case is significantly smaller than its neighbors. 2. Their tiny brains are wholly lacking a corpus callosum. This is the bit that connects the 2 cerebral hemispheres and is largest in intelligent animals. And 3. Their tiny malformed brains are smooth. Smooth-brained isn't just an unusual way of insulting someone's intellect. The gyri and sulci are the ridges and valleys of the brain which increase surface area where the thinking happens. Opossums lack these thinky bits, but unlike their moronic marsupial cousins, the koalas, they're not completely inept at basic survival. They are, in effect, the animal equivalent of what used to be called idiot savants. If you're unfamiliar with the term, think Rain Man, but with more drool and a prehensile tail. Ironically, unlike Rain Man, opossums are kind of terrible at counting, with mama possums being notorious for forgetting how many joeys they have and leaving kids behind, a bit like Pecos Bill or Kevin McAllister. Despite these literally idiotic traits, their ability to solve mazes and remember the location of hidden food way after the fact surpasses that of comparatively brainier cats, as well as dogs and rats, two animals well known for their intelligence and trainability. Step aside horses and cats, we've got a new competitor for the title of God's most autistic creature. Sadly, intelligence isn't the only aspect of opossums that suffers in comparison to cats and raccoons. You may have heard that cats have 9 lives, or the ironically skunked expression, a coon's age, referring to a long period of time, but opossum longevity is wanting, to put it gently. Putting it more bluntly, both cats and raccoons will regularly live well past a decade in captivity, away from the natural restrictors of lifespans such as predators, but the Virginia opossum can be expected to live only about 4 years in captivity, and half that in the wild. The current theory is that because they're a prey species whose primary natural defenses are hissing, drooling, and apparent death, also known colloquially yet appropriately as playing possum, there was minimal evolutionary pressure for the species to waste its skill points on longevity, if you see what I mean. Support for this hypothesis comes from Sapelo Island off the coast of Georgia, where a population of possums has been living for millennia, isolated from their natural predators, and their average lifespan is roughly 50% longer than their mainland relatives. Moving to the other end of the opossum now, we find a prehensile tail. To modern Americans, this feature is at most a marginal novelty, but it's actually quite a fascinating adaptation and a fantastic example of convergent evolution. In addition to these marsupials, prehensile tails can also be found on placental mammals like spider monkeys, non-avian reptiles like chameleons, and even ray-finned bony fish such as seahorses. What makes this adaptation so unusual is that although it's widespread biologically amongst many groups of animals, it's not widespread geographically. Nearly all mammals with true prehensile tails live in the Americas, suggesting that it's a New World adaptation. It can also be found sparingly on Australian possums, but with rare exceptions like the binturong and tree pangolin, prehensile tails are almost never found amongst the Old World animals of Afro-Eurasia. This means that prehensile tails would have been fantasy physiology to European colonists in the Age of Exploration. They're a bit like fireflies or electric eels. If you didn't grow up with the common knowledge that bioluminescent insects and electric fish are just things that exist, you'd call fantasy bullshit on anyone making that claim later on. We can say the same thing for the pouch or marsupium, which gives marsupials their name, due to their geographic distribution. Located inside an opossum's pouch are her teats, which brings me to my next Blursed opossum fact. They're some of the only animals which are generally not rule of 1/2 compliant. For those of you to whom this is a new term, the rule of 1/2 states that the average litter size of a given mammal is approximately equal to 1/2 the number of nipples. For example, humans and elephants have 2 nipples each, and usually only have 1 kid at a time, whereas pigs possess 12 to 14 teats and have roughly half a dozen piglets at a go. Opossums have to violate this rule, however, because short of intervention from King Solomon, one can't have half a baby. That's right, opossums have an odd number of nipples, 13 to be exact. Now, you may be wondering about the exact arrangement of this baker's bosom. Is it 6 nipples on one side and 7 on the other, or 2 rows of 4 with a row of 5 in between? Maybe it's 2 rows of 6 with a secret bonus nipple hidden elsewhere. Perhaps they're laid out like a 6-pointed star, or maybe they're all just scattered about randomly. Well, as strange as it sounds, they're actually arranged like the breech of a Lamat revolver, with 12 nipples in a circle with 1 more in the middle. Of course, only the females have pouches. The males, like all marsupials, have a bifurcated penis, but I said all I wanted to say about that subject in the kangaroo video, so let's look at their opposable thumbs instead. First of all, they have them. This makes opossums some of the few non-primate mammals able to make this claim, although it just sounds like unintelligible hissing when they try. Other animals with truly opposable thumbs include certain genera of rats and mice, making their little grabbies a little grabbier, as well as koalas and some polydactyl cats, as mentioned in last year's Cursed Animal Facts video. Possum thumbs are also their only digits which lack claws, and, weirdest of all, these thumbs are on their hind feet. This also makes their tracks, or spoor, relatively easy to identify, as the thumbs often jut out to the side by 90 degrees or more. And your word of the day is spoor. Combined with their prehensile tails, these unusual hind feet make the rear end of the opossum the grabby half, kind of like a bird. You know, thinking about it, the rear end was the wombat's more interesting half as well. Are marsupials just naturally more fascinating a tergo? Well, at this point I've made videos examining kangaroos, wombats, koalas, and now opossums, so feel free to watch them all, and then you tell me. Why did I make all of these videos about marsupials? Simple. It's because they're just weird little guys like me. That makes them fascinating, and here on my channel, we let our freak flag fly. Thanks for watching, and have a fascinatingly freaky day. For anyone wondering when I'm going to make a platypus facts video, the answer may very well be never. This is because every time I think I know all, or even most, of the fascinating facts about these little weirdos, I learn something new. First, I learned that there was an animal like a beaver with a duckbill and webbed feet which laid eggs despite being a mammal. Then I learned that the males have venomous barbs on their ankles, and the females literally sweat milk because monotremes never evolved nipples. Next, I learned about their semi-prehensile tails and electrolocative abilities, and only earlier this month did I learn that the curious little critters knuckle walk like a goddamn gorilla. And I'm not the only one who's constantly discovering new things about them, either. It was only in 2020 that scientists discovered platypuses glow a vibrant blue-green color under UV light, 13 years after Phineas and Ferb put a teal platypus on screen. Suffice to say, new information about the world's favorite ornithorhynchid is always coming to light, pun absolutely intended.